I spent 7 years doing inner work, and honestly, some of the most important things that I learned are not what people talk about. So if you've been doing the inner work and still feel stuck sometimes, this might be exactly what you need to hear. Hi, I'm Kennedy. Welcome to Deeply Spiritual, Totally Human, where inner work meets real life. So when I sat down to prepare for this video, I discovered that there were a lot more than 7 lessons or truths that I've learned over the past 7 years of this journey. However, there were 7 that really underlined all the experiences that I navigated over the past 7 years. And so I wanted to talk about those. So let's get into it. So the first one is spirituality is a very personal relationship. There is no one in between you and the source of your creation. You have a direct connection. And I also learned that I don't need to invalidate anyone else's beliefs in order for mine to be valid. And so I was sitting down one day in meditation and this sort of inner knowing came to me. It's just like, if no one else validates my beliefs, are they still valid? And I was like, absolutely, they are. So I don't debate other people's truths. I will offer my perspective, my wisdom, my experience as validation towards my belief system, but I keep spirituality and my spiritual journey as something that's like really sacred and just between me and the spiritual realm. Number 2, and one of my most profound truths, is that healing is a reclamation project. Spirituality is a reclamation project. I am who I am despite the things that I've experienced in life, not because of them. What I've discovered in my journey is that really integrating wisdom feels like rediscovery. It feels like there's a part of me that knew truth all along, but there were things in the way, there was fear in the way of me being able to see that truth. And as I navigated healing, as I navigated my spiritual journey in reaching for truth, it really just felt like remembrance. So I am a firm believer in that. Again, you are not the things that have happened to you. You are who you are in spite of them. So the third thing that I realized is that reincarnation is real and reincarnation is a gift. And the gift of it is that this time, the pressure of time that I would typically put on myself, that I was taught to put on myself in terms of needing to have it all figured out and needing to, check certain boxes by a certain age and all of that stuff is an illusion. The reality is that there are things that I'm going to spend lifetimes learning, and that is okay. And there's a lot of peace that comes with that realization. There are things that I didn't quite finish learning in my previous lifetime that I am going to finish learning in this lifetime. And there are going to be things that I start learning in this lifetime that I'm not going to finish learning about. And that's okay. And there is so much liberation in that. The example that I like to use is language. You grow up in a household that is English speaking only, and you discover that you love French. So you want to learn to speak French. There is no expectation that you should already know how to speak French. There is this curiosity and this intent to learn something new. And I believe that that's true about everything. If you grew up in a household where you were taught a poverty mindset, you shouldn't already be expected to know an abundant mindset. There is the curiosity when you are exposed to an abundant lifestyle. There's this curiosity and desire to want to learn what it means to be abundant. And that should happen without shame. Like, there should be no shame in wanting to learn something new for yourself. The fourth thing that I learned is that spiritual hygiene is real. It is wonderful to be exposed to spiritual practices and during the initial phases of your spiritual awakening, because there is this very deep level of connection that is established and nurtured through meditation, through tarot, through astrology, all the esoteric tools. But at the same time, the more deeply you get into your spiritual journey, the more awareness you have, the more awareness that you have to patterns in your life that do not serve you, this version of you, the more awareness that you have to low vibrational energy. And your exposure to those things don't change. However, the level at which they impact you can absolutely be mitigated and should be through spiritual practices. So I don't get lazy with my meditation. And if I do, then I very quickly recognize that, hey, this is not optional. Meditation is not something I'd like to do when I get to it. It is a necessity, just like eating, just like working out, just like sleeping, breathing. And by having that as part of my core belief system, then my spiritual practices are deeply ingrained in my life. They serve as my foundation, and they are a big part of who I am. Number 5, and stay with me because we only have a few more to go. So number 5 is, man, this is probably the most emotional truth of all of them. And it took me the full 7 years to learn this truth. And that is that love is a greater teacher than suffering. I have found in my experience that creating an invitation to learn through love is a far greater teacher. Like, those lessons are going to stick far more than suffering. Quick example, you go through a really bad heartbreak, life-altering heartbreak, and you are just completely done with love. You've lost hope around it, and you meet somebody, and through real life relationship stuff, they consistently show up for you in love. So much so that you have a new perception or a new outlook on relationships. Your heart completely changes because you were taught something in love. If you were to get another lesson in suffering, how would that move you forward? It really wouldn't. So the core belief that I like to carry, which is a direct contradiction to my upbringing, is that love is a far greater teacher than suffering. So I am inviting in lessons and evolution and growth to happen through love versus suffering. Number 6, and this is really big, y'all. Whether you are just on an inner work journey or you're on a spiritual journey, I think it applies for both. And it kind of ties into one of the truths that I said earlier, but I'd like to elaborate on it. Healing is a reclamation project. It is a remembrance of wholeness. It is the restoration of wholeness, and shame has no place in your journey. You do not need to be ashamed of the fact that you were taught a certain negative core belief. There's no shame in that. It's not something you chose. It's something you were handed. So there's no shame in reaching for a different lesson, for a different core belief. I find that it's very easy to get wrapped up in shame when you're doing the work, when you recognize your patterns and you unconsciously repeat a pattern. There is no shame in that. There is just great accountability to continue to reach for something different. And the way that you teach your subconscious to respond to life differently is by giving it new data, but also giving it new experience, which means you may not get it right the first time. Awareness creates the opportunity for accountability, but it doesn't demand accountability immediately. It just demands your accountability to try, to keep trying, to continue to give yourself as many chances as possible to achieve or really, really integrate that new belief system. And that brings me to the final one, which is the power of the tongue and co-creation. This one, I also have to admit that it took me at least a full 6 years. One of the first things that I learned about was manifestation. And I absolutely did the manifestation practices initially. I did the affirmations, I did the writing practices, and I absolutely manifested the things that I desired. What I discovered during that process is it's not just about what you can manifest. It's not just about what you can bring in. It's also about what you can retain. And the ability to manifest something doesn't change the underlying belief system that you have. So I believe that both are necessary. It's important to understand the power of the tongue, and that what you speak, what you believe, is what is actively co-creating your life. And there is great responsibility in that, because I lived much of my life with the belief system that things happened to me, and some of them were divine, and others were consequences of my actions. And I was in a position of always responding to life rather than just really having that belief system that I was creating my life. Of course, I had the awareness at the beginning of my journey that I am a co-creator, but it took years of experience, of highs and of lows, to really integrate that into my core belief system, where I have the absolute belief and the accountability that comes with that, that I am creating my life. You're going to have to learn as you go. So you want to be an active participant in what that looks like. You want to take accountability for everything in your life, because that is the only way that you then reclaim the power to be able to change everything in your life. So if you're on this journey and anything that I said resonated with you, or was something that you hadn't really heard before or hadn't heard talked about, just know that if at times you're feeling stuck, you're not stuck. Some lessons just take time to land. If you yourself have some truths that you now live by, that you discovered during your inner work journey or during your spiritual journey, that you also don't hear talked about a lot, please drop them down in the comments. I would love to chat more about this, and I will see you guys next Tuesday.